Welcome back to our second episode of Matt and Eric Talk Twins. Today, we actually have some news to talk about. Obviously, the Baldelli firing and subsequent Derek Shelton hiring, as well as their first round of roster cleanup. So, I am Matt.
I'm Eric, and I am just happy that we have some actual MLB or MLB and Twins news to talk about this early.
Yeah, it's been a little different from most Twins off seasons. I feel like it's January before we have anything to note most times.
I appreciate that they're getting started earlier. I know when we talked about them jumping, I guess not jumping the gun, but being pretty quick and pretty decisive on getting Baldelli out and Shelton in, that we would like to believe in an ideal world that means they're going to be starting to put more work into the off season sooner as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the hope. I don't know if that'll actually happen, but um, it's definitely encouraging that they're making moves early. They've cleaned out the roster. They have a new manager in place. I mean, at least when I look at this team, like I think they have a lot of room to add salary. Whether they will or not, I think is questionable. I definitely wouldn't expect it. But like if they want to be aggressive, it's a team that could have a quick turnaround,
I
but
mean, the big problem with
it's
that, we
we'll see.
touched on a bit last episode. Even if they have the money, who's coming to Minnesota right now? Who's going to look at everything that the Polads just did and say, yep, sign me up for more of that? That's where I'm going to get my money from.
Right. It's going to be I think what's going to have to happen is it'll be a first Carlos Correa signing type thing where the market just doesn't show up for a guy and they just kind of fall into the Twins' lap. But I mean, I don't know that that's
No, and
super
even the
likely to
Correa
happen.
deal feels like it was kind of born out of just some really unique circumstances where, like you said, unless you get kind of a unicorn free agent coming through the market, and I think that will be something that will be apparent pretty quickly at least, which is a good thing for the Twins. I think that normally those higher wattage, higher value free agents are going to be generating talks earlier. Like, I'm sure the day free agency opens, Kyle Tucker's agent has half the league calling him. And so I think they'll at least have a feel pretty quickly for what guys might be within their reach. But even if they do, I don't think they would act on them very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think the guys that could make sense are all of the like first base, corner infield types. Like there's a bunch this offseason, and I could definitely see a situation where the Twins I don't know that it'd be like early in the off season, but like we get to February and one of the guys is still hanging out there without much of a market, and the Twins pull the trigger. So like obviously there's Pete Alonso who's a free agent again, and then there's also Munetaka Murakami who's the uh, just kind of Japanese phenom who's been mashing in the Nippon Professional League for a few years. We also have Kazuma Akamoto, who's coming over also from Japan. A little bit older, but another great slugger. And there's other guys like Eugenio Suarez, Alex Bregman, even like Jorge Polanco and Luis Ariz. Josh Naylor's around as well. Yeah, I mean, I think Polanco is going to get a 2 or 3 year deal for like
Especially after the
12 to
playoffs he
15
just
million a
had.
year. So I think that's probably out of the Twins' wheelhouse.
Yep.
But like Ryan O'Hearn right now, MLB Trade Rumors has him projected for 2 years, 26 million. Definitely a chance that like that market just doesn't develop, and he's available for 1 year, $10 million in January, and we just give him the Carlos Santana contract and let him ride.
I was also looking at O'Hearn as just kind of a logical pick for the Twins. I think even though he put up 4.6 WAR last year, I don't buy that this is a completely new Ryan O'Hearn. I haven't dug deep into the batter ball profile to figure out what is different about his season this year, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see him picking up another 1 year kind of prove it deal to try and get to a bigger payday next off season.
I mean, I think the last couple of seasons he's proven that he can hit right-handed pitching. Like I feel like he's a solid like 120 WRC plus guy against righties, and not someone you want to play against lefties. So like strong side platoon first baseman is not going to be that
Mhm.
expensive ever. But I could see a situation where the Twins say, we're going to give O'Hearn 1 year and $12 million, and he's going to play against righties, and we can put, I don't know, call up, I mean, put anyone out there. You can find a
Yeah, and we
right-handed
do
hitting
know
first baseman.
that Falvey sure loves his left-handed hitters in the positions that are supposed to be swinging the bats.
I mean, the Twins had Jonah Bride as a platoon first baseman this last year, so it's
Is he a free agent? We could bring him back.
the Twins. He just elected minor league free agency.
Oh, that's right. Is he still with the Twins organization?
No, he was with the Twins like through the season, but he is now a free agent. A couple of other interesting guys: Miguel Andujar, the Yankees legend. Uh, he had a great stretch with the Reds after the deadline. Not sure that he's a great defender at first, but he can at least swing it a little bit. He should be available on a 1 year deal. Josh Bell, famously hot and cold, but there's a chance that he could get hot and be solid. Former Twins prospect Lewin Diaz is coming back over after absolutely mashing in the KBO for the last few years. And he's known as
Little Eric Thames action there.
and he's like a high quality defensive first baseman. Like when he was coming up through the minors, there's a lot of people who thought that he would be like a Gold Glover. So if the bat has now come around, he could be interesting, and he's another guy that should be available for cheap. We talked last time about Paul Goldschmidt. Rhys Hoskins is another bounce back candidate at first.
Hoskins is the interesting one to me. When he was up for free agency in after 23, I was really kind of pounding the table back then for the Twins to go get him, and he, I mean, didn't really do anything spectacular in Milwaukee to make you say, "Wow, that was a miss." But if we could get a slightly above 100 OPS plus first baseman in, which is what Hoskins has been the last 2 years there, I think that's already one of the biggest pickups for the Twins in the offseason.
Yeah, and I mean it would be cheap. He's probably looking at like 1 year, 5 million or less, because he's been so injured and kind of whatever for the Brewers. I mean, he lost his job to Andrew Vaughn, so
Not that anybody could have really kept their job with what Andrew Vaughn was doing, but
I mean that just more than anything points to the White Sox incompetence. It's like, oh, here's a top 10 pick who mashed all through college, goes to the White Sox, is okay in the minors, turns into a pumpkin, is the worst player in baseball, gets traded, immediately becomes like the number 3 hitter on the best team in the league. Like that's
it really warms your heart in a time and place where there's not a lot of that for the Twins. At least we can rest assured that we are still above the White Sox. We do clear the bare minimum.
I am not sure that the Twins finish this season with a better record than the White Sox. It's looking unlikely.
I think that really depends on what direction they want to take. I know we talked about Falvey in the Baldelli era not really ever being willing to fully throw in the towel before a season even started and making some surprisingly win nowish moves with these Twins. Do you think that holds up with Shelton coming in, or do we think that Shelton is just going to kind of carry the status quo of what Falvey wants? I mean, that would make a lot of sense to me with Shelton being a previous Falvey hire, working with the Twins through the Falvey era. Really, to me, this just screams a continuity hire for Falvey and the Twins.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can circle back to the manager hire. We kind of got off on a side tangent about players, but yeah, to me, I feel like this is a front office that has never thrown in the towel on a season. Even 2018, when they were the worst team in the league, they went into that season signing guys like Logan Morrison and Lance Lynn to pretty solid deals. And so I think they're going to at least take 1 year flyers on some guys, try to give the team a chance to compete, and then if it's not working, blow it up more at the deadline. But I don't know. I don't think that they have enough juice to make any sort of run without a big swing. And I just don't think that's going to happen. Even if it probably should, because I'm also not sure that this front office has a whole lot of leash left. Yeah, they've missed the playoffs 4 out of the last 5 years. So, like, I don't know, any reasonable organization would be like, maybe we should reevaluate this instead of promoting the president of baseball ops to their president.
I definitely think that was a funny decision, but I also kind of wonder if it was not last ditch effort by the Polads, but basically kind of a finality type move where they've given Falvey the complete and total reins now. They let him fire Baldelli and handpick his new manager. I think that Shelton and Falvey down the line might kind of quietly get tied to the hip more than we might think, where if Shelton comes in and he posts multiple bad seasons, I would reckon he'll probably get at least a 2 year leash just with how bad the Twins are expected to be this year. But I think there's a real world where if we're, God, it would be the 2028 off season, coming off of 3 straight losing seasons with no direction, I think that we could be seeing the complete house cleaning.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. It's definitely a situation to watch. I guess we can talk about the Shelton hiring in general. I just don't think it's super it's not it doesn't paint an encouraging picture for Twins fans. Just because, like you said, he's previously been the Twins bench coach. He went to Pittsburgh to be the manager. He struggled in Pittsburgh, and now he's coming back when our team is struggling. And I don't know that he's going to be the guy that can turn it around. Honestly, I think the only thing that can turn it around is a front office making big swings to improve the roster and having some players finally come up and be impactful from the minors. And so I don't know. What it just screams to me is that the Twins wanted to hire someone they're familiar with and someone who has experience being around a losing organization and isn't going to like throw the whole front office under the bus to the media. And it seems like that's Derek Shelton. Like he's going to be professional. They know him. They know he won't embarrass them. And that's their criteria for deciding a manager right now.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the job Shelton just left the Pirates, and I think it becomes pretty clear that he is kind of your consummate professional when it comes to managing a bad team. What this gives me a lot of the same energy as is the Braves hiring Walt Weiss, right after Snitker decided to retire. When that news first came out, it kind of felt a lot of the same, where it's like, all right, old guy's out, but not necessarily by choice, which is a little different from the Minnesota situation here, where Baldelli was fired. But it's really just kind of a continuity hire for a team, both on the Braves and the Twins aspect, that I don't think was good enough to deserve having a continuity type of hire. I think a little less for the Braves, definitely for the Twins. You would have liked to have seen something get shaken up a little more, just so we could feel something is different around.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the Braves, it's like they've been one of the best teams in baseball for the last few years. And then this season, like everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And so like I definitely understand them doing more of that continuity hire, especially because they have a super veteran roster that should be made to win now. And so I don't know that I had a big problem with that. And Walt Weiss was their bench coach for a few years and used to be the Rockies manager for like a long time. So I feel like
That's definitely a sterling resume point. Rockies manager, 2013 to 2016, he was there, which is when they did nothing.
No, that was when they had Story and Blackman and Arenado and were actually decent. They just had no pitching.
Was 16 the year they made that really crazy run to the wild card with Kyle Freeland pitching like an ace out of
It's
nowhere?
somewhere in that stretch, yeah. And that's also when they had Herman Marquez and Antonio Senzatella looking good, and they gave them extensions only for their arms to immediately fall off.
Average Rockies finish. I'm looking up some of these Rockies teams. It would appear that Walt Weiss never finished with a winning record with the Rockies.
The Rockies team also had young John Gray.
Yeah, towards the end they sure
Yeah.
did. That 2013 Rockies team, that would be a trip down memory lane, but
Yeah, anyways, I feel like this Twins hiring is kind of, I don't know. It's not very inspired. It's not encouraging for Twins fans. It's just kind of a continuation of what we've seen. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't know. I feel like there's honestly not a whole lot to talk about with Shelton. It's kind of a boring hire.
I don't necessarily know if I mind that though when we talk about the hirings that have been going on as a whole through the MLB. I know we've talked about it a bit, but there's a weird trend this year where a lot of younger guys are getting first time manager experience or first time manager gigs, and it's really coming from all over the place. I mean, the Angels hired Kurt Suzuki, the Padres pulling Craig Stammen out of their front office, and even the Angels pulling, or no, not the Angels, sorry, the Giants pulling Tony Vitello all the way or straight from Tennessee. I am not a fan of these unexperienced first time manager hires, especially for some of these better teams like the Padres and the Giants that I think will be telling themselves they're competing next year, even if they might not be in the Giants' case.
I don't know. I don't mind him, especially Tony Vitello. Like, he has run a whole organization at Tennessee to a lot of success, and he's the kind of guy that can come in and change a culture and bring a winning atmosphere to the Giants. And I feel like he's going to work really well with a young president of baseball ops in Buster Posey, and they both bring that like high energy young former player to San Francisco. I liked that hire. Craig Stammen is just like general good guy, baseball vet, was in a front office or was in a clubhouse forever, and is just beloved around the league. And also, like, I feel like a lot of managers are former mediocre players, and Craig Stammen was just like a fine low end setup man, middle reliever forever. I think he'll be okay. And like Kurt Suzuki was a long time catcher, Twins All Star, by the way. And I don't know. I didn't mind those hirings. I feel like it's at least interesting.
I, out of all of them, think I like the Kurt Suzuki hire the most, just because he's had some time to be a coach and be around the game in ways that, like, again, Craig Stammen was also a former player, but just jumped right into the front office. To me, maybe this is totally off base, but I think just by nature of having been a catcher in the league for over a decade, I think that catchers always have the best feel of their team and their clubhouse, and I think that it's the closest blend to being a manager while still being on the field, which is why I really like the Suzuki hire compared to some of these other guys. In general, I just feel like there's kind of a leadership aspect to being a manager that sounds obvious when you're talking about it, but I think that until you've been in the clubhouse at some level doing that type of managing, I just think it's a totally different beast. So I think that your hires like Vitello or who did the Orioles bring
Craig
in? Craig
Albertaz.
Albertaz. Yep. Who was the associate manager for the Guardians for 25 and has been around the Guardians for a few years. I like guys that at least have some sort of experience. We talked about Craig Stammen. I don't see what he brings to a clubhouse that nobody else couldn't also bring with more bonus and more benefit.
So, I mean, I think the big thing with managers is that, like, from a fan's perspective, anything that a coach or a manager does, we don't necessarily see. And so like these guys could be doing a lot behind the scenes. They could be beloved by the organization. They could be having great relationships with the players that they're going to coach. And it's like we don't see any of that. And so it's easy to be like, oh, this guy, what does he do? Or like, what has this guy done? Or I don't know if he's a good leader. But like we don't know if any of these guys are a good leader, really, I feel like.
But I feel like that also just kind of plays into my point that we don't know these guys. And for some organizations, that's okay. But I just really can't get over this Stammen hiring. I think the Padres are going to open as probably a top 3 National League favorite to make the World Series, assuming that Preller goes out and does what he does frequently in this off season. And I think that putting such an unknown quantity into the most important position in that clubhouse is such a scary move for such an already foundationally solid team to be making.
Yeah, I mean, that could be. Okay, circling back to the Twins, I think we've covered their managerial hirings. We can also talk about the rest of their coaching staff. So it sounds like Colby Suggs is going to be on the way out. He's their bullpen coach. They just hired LaTroy Hawkins to fill that role. Jace Tingler has also left the Twins staff, and he's going to be the bench coach for Tony Vitello's Giants. And then Hank Conger also said that he will not be returning next year. So it sounds like there's going to be quite a bit of turnover for like the non-manager coaches on the staff. I would imagine that we'll see Pete Mackey come back next year as the pitching coach. And since they just hired him, I would think that Borg Schulte will be back as the hitting coach. But a lot of those other ancillary coaches will probably be turning over.
I'm really excited for that LaTroy Hawkins signing. He's got multiple years with multiple organizations under his belt, which is something I really like in a coach, especially a positional coach, where they're focusing on more niche development and finer processes. I think anytime you've been around the league more, you've got more experience and it's going to show better. Also, I'm kind of just glad that LaTroy Hawkins won't be in the booth anymore. He was a fine broadcaster. He has a lot of baseball knowledge, but I just was never really a huge fan of him in the booth.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I wasn't the biggest fan of him in the booth, but it's definitely clear that he has a lot of baseball knowledge. I mean, he pitched like 23 years in the Major League Baseball. And I think the big thing with him is that this is probably going to be a year where the Twins have a lot of uh, a lot of former starting pitching prospects moving to the bullpen. I mean, CJ Culpepper is probably going to move. We'll probably see Marco Raya out there. Maybe Connor Prelip. Um,
Please, please, please.
there's also Andrew Morris, Travis Adams, Pearson Ole. There's just a lot of guys who came through the minors as a starter and then have kind of gotten rocked in the big leagues and will probably be moving to the pen. And that's exactly what LaTroy Hawkins did. He was a good prospect, absolutely atrocious as a starter, and then became a good setup man for 20 years. So I think that'll be helpful to have his knowledge.
Yeah, I'm excited for him. I guess I can't say a whole lot else about the other hires. Obviously, they haven't replaced Hank Conger yet. I guess if you're gonna, because Conger was just our first base coach still by the end of the year, right?
No, he has gout in
Twins?
his foot, so he couldn't be standing for that long. So they replaced him with someone else, and he was just the catching coach.
It sucks, but I mean, ultimately, when you're switching catching coaches, that's just not going to catch much of a headline. I know that Conger was, by all accounts, really well liked in the organization, but I think for the most part, the important positions are just going to get rolled over here.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, so I think the coaching staff, there's not a whole lot of interesting stuff, not a whole lot of crazy hirings. I mean, even like a few years ago when the Twins signed Wes Johnson from the college ranks, made him their pitching coach. That was interesting. It was outside the box, and I just don't think we're going to see anything like that this hiring cycle. I mean, their main like their main coaches are pretty set in stone and not super exciting. And I just don't think they're going to make any super crazy hirings for those kind of ancillary coaching roles.
Yeah, it's like kind of coming full circle. We touched on it towards the start, but I think that Baldelli getting fired kind of puts Falvey in the hot seat. So I don't really foresee the Twins getting bold in any of their coaching and probably just moves in general until they get back to a point where I think Falvey has a little more job security.
Yeah. Okay. Looking at other guys the Twins could take a look at in free agency, I think an interesting one is maybe Ha-Sung Kim. MLB Trade Rumors has him projected for a 2-year, $30 million contract. He just declined a player option with the Braves. He's coming off of shoulder surgery 2 years ago, and he played kind of the second half of this season and was okay. He was a lot better once the Braves got a hold of him, but as a whole was just kind of a solid hitter in the big leagues. His defense also fell off a little bit this past season, but has been a plus defender at shortstop in the past. This seems like a guy who could get, you know, not the most expensive or longest term deal, but could be a very interesting shortstop option for the Twins, especially if they don't have faith in Brooks Lee being the everyday guy there.
My issue with that train of thought is that I don't see how Ha Sung Kim would be a massive enough improvement at short that it would be worth the Twins pursuing because they're not exactly trying to win the World Series here. So I think if a guy A isn't a part of any sort of long term plans, which Ha Sung Kim definitely would not fit into, and B would be generally treading over the role and territory that some of our younger guys already have, I wouldn't be a huge fan of the move, and I don't see the Twins necessarily plugging a hole like that either when we're talking a guy like Brooks Lee, who was still the eighth overall pick just a few years
Yeah.
ago.
I mean, I can definitely see that. I think they'll give Brooks Lee a lot of run to prove that he can be, if not a shortstop, a major league infielder. That's more of if they don't think Lee is going to be a shortstop, yeah, maybe they want to move him to second base and turn Keishel into more of a utility guy. Ha-Sung Kim at least just raises the ceiling because he's going to be an average or better shortstop, something that Brooks Lee really isn't. And he also can be an above average hitter. That raises the floor for you, where you just know you have at least a competent shortstop option. And then there's also a little bit of ceiling there where he could be a good defender with an above average bat, at which point it goes a long way towards either helping you contend or he's on a short term deal. That salary is tradable at the deadline, and you could flip him and maybe get a decent return.
I would imagine that's going to be the target of most of these free agent acquisitions this offseason because realistically, nothing we do in the next 2 to 3 years is going to move the needle that much for the team with how far down they've fallen and how much they need to rebuild. And so I think that the Twins are going to be shopping in that tradable vet category. I know we talked about some of those like teams that were signing Logan Morrison, guys like that, Gio Urshela even that are just movable. And that's kind of the tier of players I would like to see the Twins shopping in. Looking across the diamond at spots we needed filled, Gio Urshela, I just mentioned, is once again a free agent.
Nick,
I think
dude.
that
No.
getting, but like, I don't really know what's going on with Royce Lewis at this point. I know his defense improved a bit at third base, but I don't think that he's at a point where we couldn't consider adding a guy who could play third baseman, take the job from him, maybe give him some more time to get some DH reps in, focus on his hitting, see if he could maybe slide over to first base and be a solution there.
Dude.
That's kind of where I would like to see the Twins target another veteran presence outside of probably first base as what I assume they would
I
go
mean,
with.
Gio Urshela is just so bad, and then shattered his pelvis, and then came back with the Angels,
Gio
and then was
Urshela
worse.
might not be the answer, but like Yohan Moncada, also free agent, already 31, which makes me feel really, really, really old as well.
Yeah,
But just something in that kind of still nice with it, headed on the wrong side of his athletic peak type of free agent for the Twins.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think getting talent anywhere for the Twins is going to be good. They have holes everywhere across the diamond, a lot of question marks. But I think if we get to the point where you're benching Royce Lewis in favor of Gio Urshela or Yohan Moncada, things have gone so sideways that it doesn't even matter if they're any better. I would rather focus on areas like
So
first base, where it's like we have Cody Clemens here. We gave the Phillies like $5,000 in the middle of the season to trade for him. Like he's not valuable. We just have a dearth of options here versus third base. It's like, all right, well, we have Royce, and we can always slide Brooks Lee back, and we have Culpepper in the minors and like other options.
maybe this is more of just a bigger conversation on Royce Lewis. I wanted to have them because to me, if you bring in another third baseman, you're not doing it to bench Royce Lewis. You're just doing it to start exploring where else Royce might be able to bring more value into this team. Because even with his improved defensive metrics at third last year, he wasn't exactly doing anything that makes you say, wow, he's got to be playing here.
Yeah, but I mean that's more of a question about his bat. Like he was an above average third baseman defensively, he just can't hit. And I feel like there's not I mean if you move him to second base or first base, it's not like that really reduces the load on his bat. Like he's still got to swing it to be a valuable player.
Yeah, and I guess really there's not a whole lot of places outside of third base that you can fall down the defensive spectrum that also have less of an offensive component attached to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think second and third are kind of on the same level. You could definitely say like, oh, we're gonna add a third baseman. Keishel can play more outfield, be like a second base outfield, like Jeff McNeil type guy, and then we can move Royce over there. That's definitely a path they could take, but I don't know. I don't know that Royce Lewis, the second baseman, is more valuable than the third baseman. It's just where your other options go.
That's very fair. And we're talking about Royce playing second base. Also, kind of brought back to mind Eddie Julian. I know we were talking before we hopped on about some of these interesting decisions to keep on the 40-man roster. Do you see Eddie Julian playing any time for the Minnesota Twins in 2026?
I don't think he makes it through the off season on the 40 man. And even if he does, he has to win a job at spring training because he's out of options. So he would have to be on the opening day roster. I feel like it's going to be hard to see where he can make it. He's still a bad defender wherever you put him. He wasn't a good hitter last year. He showed some signs in AAA that he could be an interesting hitter again. And he's definitely flashed in the past, but I don't know. I think the Twins not clearing him from the 40 man isn't so much that they have faith in him, but they think they can include him in a trade elsewhere or flip him for something rather than just cutting bait.
I do think that's an interesting way to look at a lot of these guys that survived the first round of 40-man cuts. Because, I mean, obviously the headliner was Jose Miranda off the 40-man out of the organization. That's officially in the past. And I'm not mad about that. I think that one was pretty easy to chalk up and call it a. What I find interesting, if we're looking at a lot of these guys that survived the 40-man roster cuts initially, like, does Deshaun Kersey hold any trade value? Mickey Gasper hold any trade
No.
value as a emergency catcher? That's kind of where I'm at 2, and that really just makes the Twins' first move to me more confusing. Because I get they were just clearing up kind of the necessary space right now, but if you're going to go through the effort, cutting guys, cleaning out the 40 man, I would have liked to have seen them just really cut slash say this is where we want to be standing when free agency starts so that it's a little more clear to potential free agents trying to sign, to teams trying to trade with the Twins, just everybody interacting with the team, what exactly we're doing here.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that, but they're already down to 33 players on their 40 man. So they have 7 openings for Rule 5, adding guys to protect from the Rule 5, free agents, trades, what have you. So like they have a lot of spots and they can always cut down further throughout the off season. Well, I guess up until the deadline to add people on the 40 man. But I don't know. I think there's definitely still a lot of fat on the 40 man roster, especially on the position player side. That I think they could clean up. But also, like they have so many question marks for position players, and they have so much uncertainty that I'm not opposed to keeping around those guys that they think could be interesting. Mickey Gasper is only 1 year removed from being the leading OPS hitter in AAA. They also have like Carson McCusker, who looked like a AAA Aaron Judge for the first half last year. I don't think any of these guys are necessarily going to be those impact hitters, but there's a chance, so might as well keep them around if you already have the roster space for it.
I don't necessarily agree with that line of logic because I think it invites the thoughts that if we're hitting December and January and we still haven't gained any traction in filling the holes in this roster, that we might start looking at Eddie Julian as, oh yeah, Eddie Julian. I mean, he'll get a camp invite, and I could see him playing some time for the Twins. I think that
I
they
remind you that
are.
Eddie Julian was our opening day second baseman.
I sadly do remember that, but I, like you said, would be stunned to see that happen again. And I just think that if you're still not planning on them being a part of the team next season, there's no point in holding on to them just to keep, like, you could probably go get them again if you really want Eddie Julian come like February and you think, oh yeah, actually we still need a lot of help that we think Eddie Julian can provide. I honestly don't even know what type of help you think Eddie Julian would provide. But a lot of these guys are guys that probably aren't going to get signed. And if they do, it'll be for very minimum deals. And it kind of shows that they're a dime a dozen. And if we get to March and we still need guys like this, we can just go get them in March. And at least then it's somebody new that we can dream on a little differently.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think if we were fans of a different team that had bigger aspirations, like if we were Mets fans or we were even like Tigers fans, we would spend no time talking about Eddie Julian. Like if they were on the roster, we'd just be like, oh, this is just a guy. Who cares if they go? Like I'm trying to think of an example on another team.
I know one of the guys, when we think about Mets fringe guys, that gets brought up a lot. Ronnie Mauricio kind of just doesn't really have a spot on the team right now with Lindor at short and Beatty's with Lindor at short and Beatty and Acuna getting more playing time. He kind of feels like a similarly odd man out type of situation to Julian in New York, but I think that if the Twins had Ronnie Mauricio right now, they'd probably be slotting him in somewhere on their opening day roster already.
Yeah, I mean the big thing that the Twins have right now to play with is that they have a ton of playing time available to guys, and they can bring in interesting options. They can take some of the post hype former top prospects from other organizations, give them everyday playing time, and just see what happens. But that necessitates acquiring those guys somehow. and that's going to have to come through trade because right now they just don't have enough interesting talent to fill out a lineup that you think could conceivably be good. I mean, we've talked about how much depth they have in their outfield of interesting potential impact players. If you look from left to right, we could by midseason have like Walker Jenkins in left, Byron Buxton center, and Emmanuel Rodriguez in right, with Matt Wallner as the everyday DH. That inspires a lot of hope. Potentially, those guys could be pretty good, especially when you think about Alan Roden being the fourth outfielder, fifth outfielder with James Outman in that situation. There's just a lot of talent there. Who knows what'll pan out, but there's a lot of interesting guys. But then you look at the infield and it's like, all right, well, we're going to put Brooks Lee at shortstop and maybe Keishel can field the ball at second. And I guess Cody Clemens is a guy that can play first base. And if we trade Ryan Jeffers, Mickey Gasper, everyday catcher, like there's just not as much talent.
So I think this is a good time to kind of take a step back and talk about how we both view the Twins farm system in terms of how they're going to play into this season specifically, because I think that this is really just setting up to be the right time for the Twins to be really aggressive with a lot of these guys. Like I know you already mentioned the Jenkins, Buxton, Erod outfield. That's something that I also would like to believe we could be seeing by the All-Star break. But why can't Kalen Culpepper be playing Major League Ball by the end of the year? If he continues to ball
I agree.
out, why can't Gabby Gonzalez? If I mean, kinda, he had a lot of stock fade when we traded for him because he had a really rough 2024, but he bounced back with a really nice 2025. That's another guy who was already putting up an 862 OPS in AAA last year. Like, what more do you need to see from him to get him onto the roster?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see him at some point because he was so good, like in the minors. But it's also he's the kind of skill set that I don't believe will succeed in the big leagues because he doesn't have that much power. He gets by just based on batting average. He doesn't have great plate discipline. He just kind of he's not a good defender. He's just kind of a guy who sprays the ball around, has a high BABIP, and you hope can get into some more power. But if we're talking about a guy who can only play kind of poor defense in the corner outfield, like he really has to hit. And I don't think that the power is going to be there for him to have enough impact to where you're like, yeah, this guy can play left field every day.
So maybe dying or ending on the Gabby Gonzalez hill was not the best kind of picture of what I was thinking, but in general, when we talk about adding to a lot of these spots where we need some help, like backup first baseman, maybe find a everyday shortstop if you want to move Brooks Lee around to be more utility. I just, in general, would like to see the Twins leaning towards leaving those spots open and getting more aggressive with their prospects than I would another year of Ha-Seong Kim at shortstop, and then he doesn't get traded till the end of July, and we get like 6 weeks of Kalen Culpepper. Like, just let these guys struggle at the major leagues. I know that has a lot of ups and downs to it. We've seen some teams implement that with great success. I know the Braves especially were a big team that like to extend their young guys and get them up early. And then we've seen that fail a lot too. The White Sox were really aggressive with a lot of their young core, and that had a lot of mixed results. The Angels have been doing that with a lot of mixed results. Zach Neto looks good. Nolan Shanwell is literally my
yeah,
dad.
but like that's just any prospect. Like there's going to be failures and successes.
So my point is, I guess ultimately, I think that the Twins could field a really good lineup out of just AA and AAA guys that, with a hot start, would be up by July. So how much do you factor in those reinforcements at AAA? Because I mean, I guess ultimately, my thought is we get to July, And Ha-Sung Kim has been solid, and he's our everyday shortstop. But Kalen Culpepper looks great. Nobody wants to trade for Ha-Sung Kim. Like I don't want to end up in a situation where we're roadblocking guys just because we signed veterans that we failed to offload in the middle of the season.
Okay, but if you give a 1 or 2 year deal to a Ha-Sung Kim type, if he doesn't perform, it's a 1 year deal. Maybe you can't trade him. All right, bench him. It's not like he's gonna be around next year. You just play the young guy over him then. Uh, I don't know. Looking at the Twins prospects, I think Walker Jenkins, Emmanuel Rodriguez, Kalen Culpepper are all going to be in the show this year. But a lot of the rest are like not interesting enough for us to really consider them in our evaluation in the next season, or their pitchers, where they're, I don't know, it's a whole different conversation. Like in my view of the Twins off season, they have enough starting pitching in particular where I would not be looking to add any starters, and they have enough outfielders where I wouldn't bring in an everyday type outfielder. Maybe you bring in a guy who can play some outfield, play first base, maybe a right-handed hitter that you can kind of platoon with one of the lefties in the outfield. That's fine, but I think they need to leave the spots open for both Erod and Jenkins to eventually this season get everyday at bats in the outfield. Where I think they don't have a potential like heir apparent coming up this year is in the infield, especially because I think second, short, and third, if you have a guy who can play short, he can play the other two probably. And so a guy like Culpepper, even if they bring in a shortstop, I feel like they're going to be able to play him elsewhere. We know that Luke Keeschel has the ability to play the outfield as well. Royce Lewis can play second or third. There's some mobility there. I just think I'm not a believer in Brooks Lee. I don't know that Luke Keeschel can play every day at second, and Royce Lewis hasn't really hit for a year and a half, and we just don't have a first baseman. So if there's any area to add guys where we don't have a potential improvement coming from the minors, it's first base and anywhere between second, short, and third.
So pretty much just the whole
Yeah.
infield. And I am gonna kind of take the opposite there, where even if you don't believe in Brooks Lee and Royce Lewis, like they've still got to play. You can't be given up on, especially a guy like Brooks Lee after two pretty mediocre pro seasons.
I mean, the first one was bad.
If you start moving him around, first one was bad. This was not much better. But even so, like he's a solid defender at short. You start moving him to third or second, he becomes a plus defender. He's the type of guy where the changes that the Twins have been trying to make with him are apparent. His exit velocity was up by almost 3 miles an hour last season. His hard hit percentage was up by 14%. It definitely has been affecting him. The contact that we thought was such a given for Brooks Lee, the bat to ball skills that we thought would at the least make him a 40 doubles, 10 home runs type of guy, just hasn't been there. But I think that he's done enough of what the hitting staff is asking of him that you've got to believe that he can continue to make adjustments and that there's still that shiny top of the draft polished hitter that the Twins drafted somewhere in there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not advocating for them to like not get playing time. I'm just saying that there's enough holes there where we have one guy that we think could get playing time at 3 out of the 4. We have no first baseman. Well, not all those guys are going to be healthy all year, and they won't play absolutely every game. So if we add another infield option that can play somewhere between second, third, and short, I think that alleviates some of the stress. And if one of those guys just absolutely cannot hit or gets hurt, it gives us another option there. And we're not just saying, oh, Ryan Fitzgerald is our shortstop now.
You weren't enjoying the Ryan Fitzgerald days at the end of the season.
No, but he was fine. But he's just a guy.
Let me try a name out here for you. We're talking about kind of veteran, decent bat guys that can move all around the infield. How would you feel about a little Paul DeYoung action on the Twins?
That's fine. Can hit lefties, has some power, good defensive shortstop. He'll be available for 1 year, less than $5 million. That's fine.
I think that's also the type of veteran that I would like to see the Twins zero in on, where I guess it's more, as we alluded to, if guys that you aren't going to be like heartbroken over, be making a difficult decision if you need to bench them, trade them, cut them, do whatever come the middle of the year to get more playing time to guys that are playing well. I just don't really know that we need more than two guys max that will fill that
Yeah, I
role.
mean, I think we need one guy who can be the utility infielder, like a Kyle Farmer type of guy, where it's like he can. I mean, ideally, we'd be shooting for someone with more upside than Kyle Farmer, but just a guy who will be a fine option at any of the three spots. He won't embarrass you. He'll play sturdy defense. He can swing a league average bat and just be fine. Like if one of those guys goes down or underperforms, we're not in a situation where, oh, Miranda and Julian haven't hit and Ty France sucks. Now we're gonna go claim Cody Clemens off waivers to be our everyday first baseman. It's gonna be Cody Clemens and Jonah Bride. You just want to avoid that situation at the other infield spots.
I definitely agree with that, but feel like we just kind of already have that in house with. To me, that's the role that I would like to see Brooks Lee filling this year. I agree that I don't know that he's necessarily an everyday shortstop anymore. I think that with the time he needs to take to focus and spend on hitting, that it would benefit for him to maybe get a bit of a change of scenery. But again, you're asking for a guy that can play solid, sturdy defense anywhere across the infield and not totally embarrass you with the bat. That just is Brooks Lee right now. That is, to me, the floor that Brooks Lee carries with him.
Right.
And
But the
so
thing is that you need another option behind Brooks Lee, because like if Brooks Lee is your utility, won't embarrass you, can play anywhere, but he's also your starting shortstop. Well, now if someone goes down elsewhere, you still have a hole.
no, I definitely see that. I think that that's really what I'm trying to say is I would like to target that kind of need at shortstop because you look at the team and right now you could build around pretty much any addition where you could add a first baseman. And it's like, hey, now we have a complete infield. You could add really any position. So to me, I think that the Twins should be focusing into that Paul DeYoung type. I know we mentioned Ha-Seong Kim, guys that can just kind of pick it from the shortstop position because they're also going to be the easiest to also slide down the defensive spectrum as we need.
Yeah, agreed. My ideal offseason as the Twins signing, if not someone who can be like a starter at shortstop or second base. Like I thought that Gleyber Torres would have been interesting because he's young and he's a good hitter and can play a decent second base. He's going to accept the qualifying offer in Detroit. But yeah. I think if you can add someone who can be the everyday starter at second or short, it frees up either Keishel or Brooks Lee to be your utility guy. And it adds just more of a floor to the team, as well as a guy who can potentially be interesting at the deadline or be a good enough everyday player to where we're feeling better about this team succeeding. An interesting guy that could be an old friend coming back in this role would be Willie Castro. He sucked down the stretch with the Cubs. He's probably going to be available for a pretty cheap 1 or 2 year deal, looking to bounce back. He wants playing time. He's going to be in a utility role. I think Willie Castro would be really interesting.
That kind of scares me because as you said that, I was in the middle of pulling up Willie Castro's baseball reference page and taking a look.
Yeah.
I also think that with the direction the Twins have already gone, hiring Derek Shelton, trying to kind of build that familiarity, I also would love to see Willie back in a Twins uniform. I think even if he's closer to the Cubs version of Woodley last year than he was the one that we were able to trade. That I mean, honestly, 743 OPS, 104 OPS plus with the Twins. Like he was a value. He had .3 WAR. He added value to the team, but I think just having that familiar leadership presence and a guy that, even though he spent half the year in Chicago, can help be a veteran to help Derek Shelton kind of slowly learn the ropes and kind of push his vision for the team across the clubhouse is something that would be a really underrated asset for a Twins edition.
Yeah. So, okay, I think we're on the same page that it would be good to add someone who can play second, third, or short. The wattage of that move can vary, but we want at least someone who can be a low end regular if we need them to.
Speaking of one more low end regular catching my eye, old friend, Twins legend, Isaiah Connor Falefa is a free agent as well.
Good God.
And it kind of comes off as a joke because it is kind of a joke, a lot like his lead in the World Series.
Okay, but you can't get doubled off on a liner. It makes sense.
Yeah, I've seen the breakdowns, and to his credit, the third base coach was telling him, like, he was physically marking the spot in the dirt. You go right here. This is where you need to be. So you can't blame IKF too much. It is what it is. But he is also just the exact mold of a player the Twins should be trying to target. But is he even too good to be taking a 1 year 7 mil, 2 year 15 mil type of deal with the Twins?
No, I mean that's the contract he got with the Blue Jays, and then carried over with the Pirates last year. I mean, he'll probably get a 1 or 2 year pretty cheap deal. You know the Twins love a converted catcher. I mean, that's what Kyle Farmer was. That's what Mickey Gasper is. That's what IKF was the first time they traded for him. I think he would be fine as that like fill-in guy anywhere. Be a low-end regular.
I definitely agree with that. So I think we've kind of at a point where we're rounding out the roster here. The two things I still really want to dip into is, first of all, our bullpen we'll get to, but really the catcher position. We talked a bit in the first episode about Ryan Jeffers and his potential future with the Twins, and this is where it gets tricky because we just have absolutely nothing in the system that could even be a stopgap at catcher. But do we think the Twins just roll over Jeffers for this year and lose out on his potential trade value, knowing that we might honestly get priced out of his services at the end of the year and he might not even want to come back with how bad we are?
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see the Twins moving on from him. I could see him coming back. I think it all depends on what they get offered in trade this offseason. It doesn't sound like there was a ton of interest at the deadline, but I think a lot of that is just how hard it is to get a catcher up to speed in the middle of a season. And he's been a consistently average, maybe a little bit below average defensive catcher who's been a well above average hitter. I think there's a contending team out there that would probably love to add him. It's just how much they're willing to give up. I think if the Twins get a strong offer, they should take it. It's not like this season's going to be. It's not like the Twins are playing for much this year. I do think, regardless of what they do with Jeffers, they'll sign at least one more veteran catcher, just because I think they would like to keep Johnny Pareda in AAA as a break glass in case of emergency type guy. And I don't think they want Mickey Gasper being the everyday backup catcher. So I think a guy like Victor Caratini would be interesting. He's a veteran. He's well known for his defense. He's had a couple of decent seasons with the bat. He's a switch hitter with pretty even platoon splits. He could be a low end starter. He could be a pretty good backup. I think he would be an interesting guy for the Twins to go after.
I like Caratini as a top end option. I once again wonder if, especially if we're going to keep Jeffers and kind of try and sign a guy to be the lesser side of a timeshare who's getting maybe like closer to 30-40% of the games instead of a true 50-50 split. If Caratini might even be out of our price range. I looked down the list of catchers that are available this offseason. Keep talking about reunions. Gary Sanchez is out there. Mitch Garver is a free agent, but I don't think you want him playing catcher anymore. But even just something simple but really steady defensively for a lot of these younger guys that are coming up, a guy like James McCann, Elias Diaz, guys who have been around the league, been spinning it for a while, and are going to maybe struggle to find a job this offseason. Just getting a true veteran presence that's caught so many pitchers who can make the major league transition as easy as possible for a lot of these younger guys we're going to have coming up.
Yeah, I think catcher is one that the Twins can kind of wait on. There's always a few guys that are around for a 1 year, $2 or $3 million deal come January, February, or you can always trade for a guy pretty cheap. I feel like there's defense first catchers who are always around on waivers or through a cheap trade that the Twins could go after. So I'm not super worried if they keep Jeffers at getting a catcher early in the offseason. I think they can wait on it and just insert whoever's left over on the market. I think that's a good spot for it. But if they're going to trade Jeffers, I would like to see them go out and get a guy like Caratini to be at least capable of being the starter if they move him.
Yeah, I just kind of agree with that. I think you nailed it right on the head.
Yeah. So that's the backup catcher spot. I think, as we've kind of talked about at various times this episode, the biggest position player hole for the Twins is the first base DH area. I think DH, the Twins have shown that they like to keep that spot open to rotate guys through. Outside of the couple years with Nelson Cruz, Falvey's never filled that spot with an everyday player. And also with this current Twins team, I think they have so many outfielders that spot has to be the rotating outfielder spot.
I would definitely agree because there's no other way you fit everybody who's just already on the roster into that.
Especially once Erod and Jenkins are up.
So we're really looking for a guy that could be just kind of a full-time first baseman, which makes it. So we're looking for a guy that could really just be a full-time first baseman, which to me makes the search a little more unique and more fun because I think the Twins could be focusing on more of a defensive stud at first. I know we've already talked about Paul Goldschmidt, but to me, I think that I would almost emphasize defense over a bat at first base, as weird as that sounds.
And the Twins have shown the last couple years that they really value having a good defender at first. I mean, they've won back-to-back Gold Gloves at first base with Santana and now Ty France. So I think that's kind of their line of thinking. And also, like we've talked about, the rest of their infield is pretty rough defensively. Like Royce Lewis was good this year. His throwing got a lot better. He can kind of pick it defensively, but he still isn't proven to be a great defender. Brooks Lee is a not great defender at short. He's definitely below average. Sorry, I have the Colts game on in the background, and Jonathan Taylor just scored a touchdown to win it and has like 50 fantasy points on the day.
32 carries, 244 yards, 3 touchdowns. It's just like an average Jonathan Taylor game.
Imagine getting him pretty much straight up for Jonathan Mixon or Joe Mixon. Sorry,
man, we're not gonna get started. That's a very steep path that we could run down.
So I think they're going to sign an everyday first baseman in some form. I think Josh Bell would be interesting because he's been a good defender in the past. He's hot and cold with the bat. He's probably not going to get a huge deal. Last couple of seasons, he's gotten a 1-year pretty cheap salary and then had a really bad season this past year. So I think he could be available for cheap. He makes sense. He's also a switch hitter, so not a guy that you have to having a platoon. I think on the high end, I would love to see the Twins be heavy in the market for. Okay, I don't think they're going to get Murakami. I think he's going to get a massive deal somewhere. Someone will take the risk on him. And I don't think that they're going to get Alonso or Naylor. I think they'll both have big markets. But a guy that's kind of under the radar, we talked about him earlier, is Kazuma Akamoto. He's a guy who's also been an absolute masher in Japan. He can play third or first. He doesn't strike out very much. He has some decent power. I think he's a guy that could be a good everyday player for the Twins and probably is available for a 3 or 4 year deal at like 15 million a year.
And that one's interesting to me too because we've talked a bit before about the weird pipeline from Korean Japanese players to Minnesota out of all places. We had Nishioka, we had Byung Ho Park. We were reportedly in on Shohei Otani for a little bit. It's not to me as crazy as I think a lot of people would think it is, but my question is that he's a 29-year-old rookie coming to the MLB for the first time. I just don't know that he necessarily fits the timeline or the team that the Twins are trying to build. You know, he's more of a mashing first baseman. He's fine there, but he's not sort of an elite star defensively. And I don't know that they should or will want to be investing long term money into a position that they historically have preferred to just be kind of a dumping ground defensively.
Yeah, and I mean this is on the high end of what I think the Twins could pursue, but I think there's the potential that with all the other first basemen on the market, Akamoto's market doesn't develop all that well. He's available for kind of a discount, and also it's only a 3 year, 4 year deal. I think if you keep it to a 3 year deal, his last season with the Twins will be his age 32 season. That's really not that old, especially for a first baseman. He gives some upside to at least be like an above average hitter with a decent glove. And if it doesn't work out, it's not like you're clogging up the books long term.
Yeah, it's at least a fun signing if we can get it done. It's something that will actually give us some hope and something to look forward to. But I think that if they're gonna spend some real money, I would kind of like to see it in the bullpen, honestly.
Yeah. I think I don't know. I kind of am of the opposite opinion because yes, I do think they need bullpen help, but they have so much pitching and they have such an abundance of starting pitching that I think they can piece it together out there and have a couple of guys turn into at least decent, serviceable relievers. And then if they're in it, they can always go after a reliever at the deadline. Versus first base, it's really they just have Cody Clemens, who's not very good, and he's their only option, and they don't have a prospect coming up behind him. And so I think first base is something that they need to address. It might be not a high end option. I mean, like we said, Paul Goldschmidt will be available for a cheap 1 year deal. Josh Bell as well. Maybe like a Dominic Smith or I don't know any one of these interesting 1 year guys. Lewin Diaz, I think, would be fine. I think there's a lot of first base options. I think they just need to end up with one of them.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But I do kind of want to push back on the idea that we have the pieces to piece together in the bullpen because we're realistically, what would you say, maybe 16 to 18 guys over the course of a season that a team is going to need or want to throw in their bullpen.
Yeah, something like that.
And even if we just automatically chalk up a lot of these kind of weird starter, reliever, middle ground guys like Pearson Ole and Travis Adams to full-time bullpen roles, I still think we top out at like 8 to 9.
I mean, I'm
maybe
not
10.
saying that we
like,
don't need anything in the bullpen. I'm just saying that like relievers are more fungible than a decent first baseman, and the Twins at least have guys who you could squint and see being an above average reliever, which we don't have at first base. But like, yeah, we have a dearth of talent out there currently.
Yeah, that's very fair. And I think that ultimately they have enough money where we hopefully shouldn't have to or need to nitpick between if we're spending our money at first or the bullpen. They, even if they only want to cap themselves at like 100, 110 million in spending, if they do end up shipping, especially Pablo, we would have 30, 40 million to spend on this team pretty easily.
Right. Yeah. Also, another guy I want to talk about for catchers would be Danny Jansen. He's only a couple years away from mashing with the Blue Jays. He's a well-regarded defender. He'll be available on a one-year deal. I think he would be pretty interesting.
I definitely like that too as a backup. Kind of more of a maybe even a starter type of guy if they do end up deciding to trade Jeffers, but somebody that could definitely take more of a prominent role in there.
Okay, I guess we can move on to relievers. So obviously there's always a ton of them available in free agency. I think when we got to the option deadline this year, we saw some more guys become available. Those kind of there's some interesting guys not getting their options picked up. I think among those, there's a couple of Braves arms like Pierce Johnson, who had his option declined. That was pretty reasonable. Also, like Pete Fairbanks had an $11 million option get declined by the Rays. I think he's a good low end closer, high end setup man. Um, but I'll just run through the list of some of the top relievers available. So at the very top, we have guys like Raisel Iglesias, who is just coming off of a couple of year run with the Braves as their closer. He's been very good. He's kind of on the older end, but is still a quality closer. We have Brad Keller, who for a long time was kind of a subpar starting pitcher, but now has converted to the bullpen. Was pretty dominant this past season, getting a lot of strikeouts and ground balls. So maybe he could be pretty highly sought after as a reliever. We also have Robert Suarez opting out of his deal with the Padres. He's another high-end closer, a guy who should get a solid multi-year deal. Definitely not the kind of guy that the Twins generally go after. But then I think the more interesting thing is all of the older, formerly elite relievers that the Twins have, or that are free agents the Twins could go after. In my mind, I think of like Kenley Jansen. He could be a guy who's looking for save opportunities, trying to climb that all-time list, and the Twins could hand over the keys to their closer role and bring him in for a pretty cheap one-year deal. There's also guys like Mike Soroka, who has kind of been back and forth between starting and the bullpen. He's probably looking at yet another one-year deal, but has shown flashes of dominance in the pen. He's a guy that I think the Twins could go after and would be really interesting. Is there anyone you're looking at, Eric, that could be a good fit for the Twins?
I need Emilio Pagan in my bullpen.
Dude.
No, I'm kidding. I would actually just be like in shambles. I would be inconsolable if we brought him.
My brother-in-law is a huge Reds fan, and every time I turned on a Reds game and Emilio Pagan was in the game, it almost always ended in a meltdown where I then immediately texted my brother-in-law, and he was very angry. It was like me when Emilio Pagan was a Twin.
Yeah, that is just the Emilio Pagan experience. Really amazes me that he continues to get these jobs because he's been doing this at every stop of his career. But in broader sense, I like all the names you threw out. I think that ultimately, when we talk about building a bullpen, that's kind of why it ends up being the last place that is addressed for a lot of teams because unless you're going to go shopping at the top in the Edwin Diaz, Robert Suarez, Ryan Helsley tier, which we definitely will not be doing this year. I think you really just have to believe that the coaching staff is able to identify guys that they think have some potential left to be unlocked or some bounce back candidates if you tweak their pitch mix. Some of my personal favorites looking up and down this list: Luke Weaver, little. I don't remember how long ago. Was it really just 24 that he was the everyday closer for the Yankees?
Correct.
Yeah, so I mean, fell off really hard, obviously, over the course of last year, but a guy that had a lot of upside in previous years, I think you could unlock. Maybe a guy like Steven Matz, he's been pretty just kind of okay in relief, but generally those converted starters are going to be at least pretty like solid foundational pieces of the bullpen. Even if they don't wow a guy, they're going to not totally blow up all of their appearances like we were seeing some guys with last year, like Jorge Alcala, who ended up getting cut. Um, Even farther down the list, we got a lot of Twins that would be really fun to reunite with. Ryan Presley, if he wants to keep pitching. Taylor Rod. It's really just a lot of guys that, if they wanted to keep pitching Helsley or not Helsley, Taylor Rogers and why am I drawing a blank on the lefty? Caleb Thielbar. Just guys that I think would be fun to kind of see back in a Twins uniform if we're not going to do anything else with the money or the spots.
Right. Those guys are all intriguing. There's also some guys who have been formerly elite that have been banged up or ineffective that I think the Twins could go after. Kirby Yates would be really interesting for the Twins. He's been a star closer in the past. He got a pretty expensive 1 year deal last year, but then didn't really do a whole lot with it. There's also some guys who are kind of unconventional late inning guys. They're soft tossers. They rely on their breaking stuff at command, but have been effective for a bunch of years. And that would be old friend Danny Coulomb and also Phil Maton. Maton's kind of bounced around on 1 year deals recently, but has been consistently pretty good. I think he would be a solid setup man. The aforementioned Pierce Johnson would be a high strikeout piece who theoretically is available for 1 year and less than the $8 or $9 million option that the Braves turned down. Some other guys who could be interesting. We also have Gregory Soto. His strikeout rates have never really kept up with his stuff, but he throws really hard. He's left-handed. He gets ground balls. He's pretty wild, but he's at least an upside play. Pete Fairbanks, I think they could buy in on him upping his strikeout rate again. Even if the strikeout rate doesn't come back, he's still an effective late inning reliever. There's also Anthony Dominguez. We just saw him go on that run with the Blue Jays. Gets a lot of strikeouts, walks a lot of guys. Kind of the same thing as Soto. He could be really interesting. On the high end of the short term guys, we have Ryan Helsley and Devin Williams. Would love to see the Twins make a play on either of those two. I think they'll probably go to a contender on a really expensive 1 year deal, maybe like a 2 year deal with an option. But the Twins, I think, would benefit from adding a guy like that who could be come the trade deadline, if they're back in their old form, could be very valuable, and a contending team would give up a lot for them. So I think that's the kind of player I'd be going after. And then also, you mentioned Taylor Rogers, but his brother Tyler has been durable and very good throughout his career, consistently posting insane ground ball rates and good ERAs. I would maybe go after him. And then I love your Luke Weaver pick as well.
I appreciate. So looking at a lot of these higher name guys, I would also be able to love to dream on them. I think Devin Williams would be a really cool bounce back guy, but like, what level of relief pitcher do you think we could even realistically land? Because to me, I think relief pitchers, especially as they get older, are just the ultimate ring chasers. Where Ryan Helsley, Devin Williams, they've already gotten their bags. Kirby Yates, like you said, got a massive deal last year. David Robertson has still pitching for now. But all these guys jump out to me as guys that just would not even pick up the phone for the Minnesota Twins this year because what do they have to offer? I know that when we talked in the pod last time, we brought up Kenley Jansen as another just fun name to bring in. And that's the type of guy where you can start to connect some dots of, okay, he was pitching for the Angels last year. Maybe doesn't care about the rings as much because he's already got one. Um, Definitely chasing the saves number still, and would be maybe more open to a team like the Twins, who will undoubtedly put him in as their closer and let him ride no matter how he does. But I guess my biggest worry with the bullpen is that we're just gonna get crowded out by anybody that is even pretending to compete for the playoffs in 2026.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that the Twins have working in their advantage there is that they can give opportunities for playing time or for roles that the other teams can't. Especially for okay, well, first of all, the Twins have very rarely shown a willingness to give a reliever a multi-year deal. The only time they've done it is with Addison Reed, and so I think that if we are sticking only to one-year deals, those are most often the guys who are looking for a role and an opportunity, or are on the older end and maybe want to be close to family or want to be able to chase saves like Kenley Jansen. And so potentially it works in the Twins' favor having so many open spots. Like looking at some of the lesser relievers available, I think you could make the case that a guy like, I don't know, Thielbar is the perfect example. He's a Minnesotan. He's older. He's almost always played for the Twins. He's going to get a 1-year deal. He's going to be cheap. He's going to be the best reliever in our bullpen. I mean, as of now, it's like him and Cole Sands.
Would be quite the turnaround from Caleb Thielbar, who I was ready to go and cut myself in 2024, to Caleb Thielbar, best reliever in the 26th Twins pen.
And the whole time he's been the same player. I think there's just a lot of those guys. I don't know that's worth getting into individual names, but I think there's probably 20 guys who are interesting, have at least like setup man upside, who will be available on a 1-year deal for cheap. And I think the Twins should go out and sign 3 or 4 of them and have at least, in my mind, they sign one true, like, this guy's going to be our closer, a Kenley Jansen, a Luke Weaver, a whatever. This guy's our best reliever. He's our closer. And then they sign 3 or 4 journeymen slash formerly injured 1-year guys to try to break through. And you say we have 4 big league relievers, and the last 3 or 4 spots in our bullpen are going to be filled out with the Pearson Olds, the Travis Adams, the Cole Sands, the converted starters, all of those guys who need big league innings.
Now, I would also love to see them take that direction. I have just 2 more names that I've been scrolling through that I also would really like to see as bounce backs. Jose Leclerc and Paul Sewald, both guys that formerly held down closer jobs at elite levels. And to me, that is the level of like kind of irrelevant at this point, but at one point showed enough promise to think, okay, well, we bring him in, he throws back the clock for even like 3 months, and we can trade him for something.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Sewald's kind of cooked. His shoulder's been barking last few years, and his velo's not where it should be. But Leclerc, I think, would be really interesting, especially because he's been a very high-end reliever and he's still young. Okay, well, it seems like we're kind of on the same page here. An infielder would be nice. Definitely need to add some type of first baseman and probably some sort of catcher. Depending on your plans with Jeffers, it can be higher end, it can be lower end. And then the bullpen is just wide open. Just add interesting guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we have here is a whole lot of opportunity, and that scares me because I haven't exactly been seeing the Twins cash in on that opportunity recently. And as we like, there's a lot of ways that this offseason could get fun, and we can make it a lot of fun. I think we hit on a lot of that here, but a lot of it also felt like it was still kind of filled with a tinge of optimism that I don't know I can hold for the Twins right now.
Also, I think any big swings that the Twins take or big talent infusions will be through trade. I still think that they're going to trade at least one of Pablo or Joe Ryan, which could significantly impact how this offense looks going into next year. So we talked a lot more about our possible trade thoughts in our last episodes. If you're interested in that, go back and listen. But I think there's so many options for the Twins. There's such little certainty on this roster that it'll, one way or another, be a pretty active offseason.
That's definitely something that we can count on, and thank God, because we just need anything, any sort of action to separate us from the end of last season.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hopefully in the next week we'll get some more information about the Twins. Maybe we'll have a roster move or two that we can talk about. But I think next week we'll probably spend some more time talking about what we expect the Twins to do this offseason and hopefully any new news that comes up. But Eric, do you have any last thoughts?
Gonna put it out there one more time. Connor Prelip, if he's not in our bullpen to start the season, if not outright starting, there's going to be riots in Minneapolis.
Yeah, Eric's on the Connor Prelip is Matt Canarino train.
R.I.P. Matt Cantorino. Never really got his chance.
Hey, he's still in the Twins org. They re-signed him on a minor league deal.
Don't give me hope.
All right. Well, we will talk to you all next week. I think we're going to plan on recording on Sundays and then dropping sometime early in the week. Hopefully get on a pretty consistent schedule here.
That's the dream. That's the plan.
Alrighty. Well, until then, we will see you all next time.